Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Pamela Thomas. You can call me Pam. Welcome to Online with the CMC. We are presenting Break It Down Again, the pieces of subject headings. Your presenters are Barb Scoby and Mary Cornell, and we also have our two interns, Meredith Davis and Chris Deitner. We will be recording this and sending the link out to everyone who is registered in L2. The link to the recording will be available by early next week. The slides with the notes are now posted in L2, so if you want to go grab those real quick and follow along, that would be great. So take it away. Oh, and we'll answer questions at the end. Sorry, I always forget that part.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to part 2 of our discussion of subject headings. Previously, we showed you how to find subject headings, and today we are going to break down those subject headings into their individual pieces. Let's see. Our presentation today will start out with a brief introduction hello from Mary and myself, and then CMC interns Meredith and Chris will introduce themselves. We will then cover some basic vocabulary and describe some of the kinds of subdivisions that can be found in the 600, 610, 611, 630, 650, 651, and 655 fields. Lastly, we will look at some subject headings in those fields and break them down into their components. The resources that we use to create this presentation can be found at the end. All right, so hey, again, I'm Barb.
And I'm Mary.
Let's see, as a CMC cataloger and as someone who grew up in the Edwardsville area, I enjoy the local history items that come my way. A few months ago, I was flipping through a church directory while I was cataloging it. One woman's picture caught my eye, and I yelled out, "That's Charity's mom. She made a cheerleader uniform for my Cabbage Patch Kid back in the day." And I think I still have it in a box somewhere. Yeah, I'm a pack rat.
And I'm also a CMC cataloger. My favorite thing to catalog tends to be the very family, person-specific genealogy. There's a collection I catalog for Groff Memorial Library, which we'll be talking about later, that has a lot of really great information about two women who are nurses in a family. And I love learning about the different journeys people and families go on in their lives.
All right, it's my turn again, right? Yes. No, Meredith, never mind.
Hi, everyone. I am in my final semester of the MLIS program at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. When I am not working or studying, I enjoy spending time with my two cats. That's Percival on the left in the box and Merlin on the right. I love hiking, especially when there are mountains and waterfalls involved. In addition to interning with the CMC team at the IHLS, I have interned with two academic libraries in North Carolina, South Piedmont Community College and Belmont Abbey College.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris. I'm also at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, graduating this spring. My undergraduate degree was in theater and film, and I love photography. That's one of my plays and one of my pictures right there. I currently work as a library assistant in Raleigh, North Carolina at the Olivia Rainey Local History Library, where I get to spend my days with these beautiful Sanborn maps and these elementary school newsletters from the 1940s.
Disclaimer. There are many topics within subject headings that we can talk about. A very extensive set of subject heading online trainings offered by the Library of Congress, which includes 8 multi-part modules, is available for free. However, if there is anything we haven't covered between our webinar in November and this one today that you would like us to present about, or maybe distill from LC's online trainings, please do let us know. The link for the trainings can be found in our resources slides. So we will have more vocabulary we'll be talking to you all about during the presentation, but we wanted to start with 4 basic terms that you'll probably hear several times today. These terms are subject headings, qualifiers, subfield codes, and subdivisions. According to the LCSH training provided by the Library of Congress, a subject heading is an authorized word or phrase contained in a controlled vocabulary. It is what you as a cataloger use to describe the item you're cataloging. Also, as catalogers, we must consider that, quote, topics are identified by LC subject headings to represent what the material covers, its aboutness, end quote. This also brings up an important consideration that we must think on when cataloging. Subject headings are the aboutness of an item, while genre headings, another heading type we'll be looking at briefly today, are what an item is. There are different types of headings beyond these two that we will mention in other parts of the presentation as well. A qualifier is a word or phrase used to modify, clarify, or limit the meaning. There are qualifiers for nationality, language, events, etc., which mainly breaks down to geographic, adjectival, and parenthetical qualifiers. An example of one of these is above. We have New Orleans, well, LA in parentheses. This is an example of a geographic qualifier. In this example, Louisiana, LA, the bigger geographic entity is being used to qualify the more specific heading of New Orleans. So a subfield codes are one lowercase letter, occasionally a number, preceded by a delimiter. A delimiter is a character used to separate subfields. Each subfield code indicates what type of data follows it. Subfield codes can be either letters or numbers, and the rules of how some subfields are used depends on the mark field they are utilized in. Of note, there are number subfield codes that can be utilized in several fields. However, as those subfield codes are not specific to the 6XX fields, we will not be focusing on those. Our last broad term is subdivisions. Subdivisions are the portion of a subject heading string that appears in the subfield V, X, Y, or Z, or the 6XX field, and that is used to identify a specific aspect of the main subject heading, such as form, subtopic, time, period, or place in connection with the bibliographic work to which it is assigned. Subdivisions are what you see in a string of a subject heading, or how subfields are organized. We're going to look briefly at the types of subdivisions in a couple of slides later on. As we'll be talking about subfields and subfield codes and subdivisions a great deal in this presentation, we're going to give you some visualizations of something we won't be talking about as much, which will be different qualifiers that you can see on the next slide. So for these examples, we utilized the subject heading manual instruction, or SHM, for H320, headings qualified by nationality, ethnic group, language, etc., which can be found in our resources. Our first visual example for qualifiers comes from the work Marguerite, Misty, and Me, found at OCLC number 15000507754. This is a biography of the author Marguerite Henry. This record includes a nationality qualifier in one of the 650s. This is shown through the subfield A, Authors American. This is an example of an inverted qualifier and heading. This, per our SHM glossary, is a heading that consists of a noun modified by an adjective formulated to place the noun in the initial position followed by a comma and the adjective. Our second visual example comes from the Seagull Reader poems and can be found at OCLC number 896-359-182. This includes two examples of what is called an SHM 320 uninverted headings. Like our first example, these two headings are looking at nationality groups. Uninverted headings are established using natural language. The two examples here are English poetry and American poetry. As you can see, unlike our first example, the adjective comes first and the noun comes second. Our third visual example comes from Shot Down in Flames, a World War II fighter pilot's remarkable tale of survival. This can be found at OCLC number 830-931-258. This record includes two inverted subdivisions. The first is seen in the subfield X with an inverted subdivision of aerial operations, British. The second is in the subfield V with an inverted subdivision of personal narratives, British. Normally, you would only see these inverted qualifiers in the main heading or the subfield A, but there is an exception for qualifiers like this, as in the case of inverted subdivisions with adjectival qualifiers, individual adjectives may be applied without establishing each usage if a multiple subdivision has been provided in the subject authority file or on a free floating list. These two have both been established in the subject authority file, and hence it is permitted for them to be used as they are above. As an aside, we wanted to add is that there are rules about how to properly construct subdivisions in a subject string depending on what kind of heading they are added to. However, while we will mention this briefly, this is a whole other webinar on its own. We are linking the Library of Congress's specific training about this topic on our resources slide. Firstly, we're going to look at geographic subdivisions. Geographic subdivisions are, quote, a type of subject heading subdivision that appears in a subfield Z of a 6XX field and that expresses the name of the place to which the subject or form of the work designated in the main part of the heading is limited. Geographic subdivisions may be indirect, in which the name of a larger geographic entity is placed in a separate subfield Z before the name of a more specific locality, or direct, in which a place name is assigned without the interposition of the name of a larger geographic entity. To show you all how this can be constructed in a bibliographic record, we have our example on the slide. As you can see here, we have an example of an indirect geographic subdivision, as we have Illinois and our first geographic subdivision, followed by Robinson and a second geographic subdivision. Illinois is the larger geographic entity, and Robinson is a more specific locality. Next, we're looking at form subdivisions. Form subdivisions are a type of subject heading that appears in a V subfield of a 6XX field and that expresses what a work is, such as subfield V periodicals, subfield V juvenile films, etc. For our example, I search using the authority search in connection for subdivision headings. What you'll see when we look at this example is that there are two different subdivisions for the heading genealogy. The subdivision on the top is our form subdivision with the subfield B, which tells us the item is genealogy. The second subdivision with a subfield X is our general subdivision for works about the genealogy of persons, places, etc. Barb will be talking more about topical and general subdivisions on our next slide. Of note, if we pay attention to the definition of this field, it does allow us to understand a bit more why the Library of Congress has made the decision moving forward to no longer use form subdivisions as they relay what a work is, which, as we know, is what genre form term headings relay in a bibliographic record. You can learn more about the announcement and the Library of Congress's rationale for this choice with the linked announcement and FAQ and our resources slide. However, I do want to reiterate what I said last month in our Online with the CMC presentation, that while this is a practice the Library of Congress will be taking on, we here at the CMC and SHARE will not be taking on that practice. We cannot hear you, Barb.
It would help if I unmuted myself. Anyway, Mary, thank you for setting up the board for a discussion of two more pieces, chronological subdivisions and topical subdivisions. In this slide and the next, Chris and I are going to define and discuss those subdivisions Y and X. Chronological subdivision. It's a subject heading subdivision in a Y subfield of a 6XX field that designates a period of time, such as 1945 to 1990, 20th century, etc. The general rule for placement of chronological subdivisions, Y, is to put them after a topical X and after geographic subdivision Z, but before form subdivisions V. Although putting V last in the order is the correct placement, it makes my OCD brain tingle a little because they're not in alphabetical order. Before I go into detail with my example, I would like to issue a word of caution. Don't confuse yourself like Barb did. This presentation discusses four subdivisions, V, X, Y, and Z, as they are used in the 600, 610, 611, 630, 650, 651, and 655 fields. OCLC's Bibliographic Formats and Standards, or BIB formats, lists many other 6XX fields, but for this presentation, pay no attention to any of the other 6XX fields. I found myself stuck in mental quicksand when I was looking at the chronological division in BIB formats, and then I came across the 648 field, subject added entry, chronological term. Big confusion on my part. Stick with the SHM subject headings manual when you are working with subject heading subdivisions. Otherwise, if you get into BIB formats, you're just gonna confuse yourself. Okay, so back to the chronological subdivision. I used SHM H620 to determine the correct chronological subdivision for this record. From 1920 to 1967, the National Tuberculosis Association ran the Christmas Seals campaign and issued associated promotional posters. I used the Y 20th century subdivision in the 650. It covers the range of dates when the posters were created. And as you can see, the Y subfield is tucked nicely between the Z and the V.
All right, so topical subdivision is described as, quote, a type of subject heading subdivision that appears in a subfield X of a 6XX field and that designates a specific aspect or subtopic of the main heading other than period, place, or form. In other words, the topical subfield X expresses what a work is about, the genealogy of persons, places, etc. The form subdivision, subfield V, expresses what the item is. So the example Mary gave is a book of or a collection of genealogical information as expressed by putting genealogy in the subfield V. So for this example, pardon me, our intention is to set the scene for the next slide, 600, personal name. As Mary did for their explanation of form subdivisions, we used the authority search in connection and selected subdivision headings and searched for history sources. As you can see, there are two resulting authority records, one with subfield V and one with X. The 680 field in each record instructs you how to use the heading. The instruction in that field has been highlighted on the slide. Since we are discussing topical subdivisions here, subdivision X, topical subdivision, is the correct choice for this example.
Okay, so on to the 6XX fields themselves. The first field that will be discussed is 600 personal name. This field is repeatable in a bib record. The first indicator has the following options: 0, forename, 1, surname, and 3, family name. The main options for the second indicator include 0, Library of Congress subject headings, 1, LC subject headings for children's literature, 2, medical subject headings, 3, National Agricultural Library subject authority file, or 4, source not specified. The pertinent subfield codes for this example are A, personal name, and this subfield is not repeatable within a 600 field, but you can have a different 600 field with another personal name. And subfield X, general subdivision. This subfield is repeatable within a 600 field. Okay, so this example comes from a bib record, OCLC number 1574652-012, for an item that contains abstract documents related to a property in Highland, Illinois. The property is number 4526, an abstract of title to Lot 3, Block 17, subdivision of Block 17, and 18 Parkview Edition. And then it later became 1908 Lemon Street. And Lewis Miller is the name of the first person who bought the property. And if you notice in the 600, I put, let's see, surname, so a 1 in the first indicator, and then a 0 in the second because it's Library of Congress subject headings. And just in case you were wondering what an abstract is, per the Urbana Free Library Exploring Title Abstracts, title abstracts follow the chain of ownership, usually from the original sale by the government or other agency through to the date of the most recent abstract. The abstract is a packet that includes legal documents pertaining to the property, notably the deed records and mortgages, and list where those documents are recorded. Okay, so in the 600 fields for Lewis and Louisa Miller, I use subfield X, history, and subfield X, sources, as directed in the previous slide. So they were the first owners of the property, and they're listed in the abstract. So this item is a history source for the Millers.
Our next field we will be looking at is the 610 field, or the subject added entry corporate name field. This field is repeatable. Per bib formats, this field is used for a corporate name used as a subject access point. First, we're going to look at the indicators for this field. For the first indicator, the options are 0, inverted order, 1, jurisdiction name, and 2, name and direct order. For the second indicator, the options are the same as what we find in the 600 field. There are several subfield codes a cataloger might consider when cataloging this field. They are subfield A, corporate name or jurisdiction name as entry element, subfield B, subordinate unit, subfield C, location of meeting, subfield D, date of meeting or treaty signing, subfield E, relator term, subfield F, date of work, subfield G, miscellaneous information, subfield K, form subheading, subfield L, language of work, subfield N, number of part section meeting, subfield P, name of part section of work, subfield T, title of work, subfield V, form subdivision, subfield X, general subdivision, subfield Y, chronological subdivision, and subfield Z, geographic subdivision. I have a few practical examples of this field to help us visualize the different pieces. The first is for GAR, Civil War veterans seated on steps of Farmers National Bank found at OCLC number 142-038-2831. This is the 610 from that record. In subfield A, we have the corporate name of the Grand Army of the Republic. In subfield X, we have two topical general subdivisions of veterans to bring out the aspect of the veterans pictured. In the two subfield Z's, or geographic subdivisions, first we have Illinois, which is the larger geographic entity, hence it being first, and then we have the specific geographic entity of Grayville. Our picture on the slide is the catalog picture from Groff Memorial Library. Our next example is from First Christian Church 2011, 150th anniversary at OCLC number 157-064-6838. For this example, we have two 610 fields. The first 610 field has the corporate name for First Christian Church with the geographic qualifier Bridgeport, Lawrence County, Illinois, in parentheses in the subfield A. Then, in a subfield B, we have the form subdivision of directories. Our second 610 also includes the corporate name for the First Christian Church in subfield A. However, in this 610, there is a general subdivision via the subfield X of anniversaries, etc. Our last example is from Veterans Project, Murfreesboro, Illinois, World War II era interviews. This record can be found at OCLC number 145-153-5485. I love both fields from this record because we get to see some great examples of subfield B or the subordinate unit subfield. The first shows a subfield A of United States with a subfield B of Navy, which is the military subordinate unit, and a subfield V or form subdivision of personal narratives. The second field also has the United States in a subfield A, but has two subfield Bs, one of Army and the second further subdividing the military unit and the more specific section of military with Air Corps. This field finishes in a subfield V of personal narrative.
All right, the next field we're talking about is the 611 meeting name. I have never had to do one of these, so bear with me on this. For this field, the first indicator has the following options: inverted name, jurisdiction name, and name in direct order, or 0, 1, or 2. The main options for the second indicator include 0, Library of Congress subject headings, 1, LC subject headings for children's literature, 2, medical subject headings, 3, National Agricultural Library Subject Authority file, or 4, source not specified. So for this one, the first indicator is a 2 for name and direct order. And then the second indicator is a 0 because we're using Library of Congress subject headings. This example is from a record for a report given at a meeting for the coordination of the 2002 Olympic Winter Games in Salt Lake City, Utah. And as you can see, the 611 field contains a number of subfield codes, like N, the number of part section meeting, D, date of work, C, location of meeting, and then X, general, which this meeting was about press coverage. The press coverage for the Olympic Games, Z, geographical, and it was in the United States where the meeting was held, and B, chronological. Wait a minute, I have a typo. Okay, so B is not chronological, it's for congresses.
Our next field is the 630 field, or Subject Added Entry Uniform Title field. This field is repeatable. According to bib formats, this field records a preferred title used as a subject access point. The first indicator options include 0, no non-filing characters, and 1 through 9, number of non-filing characters. This field also includes the same second indicator options as the 600 field. The subfield codes that can be utilized for this field are subfield A, uniform title, subfield D, date of treaty signing, subfield E, relator term, subfield F, date of work, subfield K, form subheading, subfield L, language of work, subfield M, medium of performance for music, subfield N, number of parts or section of work, subfield O, arranged statement for music, subfield P, name of part or section of work, subfield R, key for music, subfield S, version, subfield T, title of a work, subfield V, form subdivision, subfield X, general subdivision, subfield Y, chronological subdivision, and subfield Z, geographic subdivision.
Thank you, Meredith. For our first example, we're looking at the 630 from Charlotte and the Nutcracker, which can be found at OCLC number 128-857-6489. This record includes the 630 with a first and second indicator of 0, the uniform title, Nutcracker, geographic work, in the subfield A, and closes with a form subdivision in subfield V of juvenile literature. Our slide's picture is the cover of Charlotte and the Nutcracker. Our second example is from the Frozen Elsa Tony record and can be found at OCLC number 137-362-9025. The 630 in this record also includes a first and second indicator of 0 with a subfield A with the uniform title, Frozen, Motion Picture, 2013, Buck and Lee, and closes with a form subdivision in the subfield V of Songs and Music. Our last example of the 630 is from Jack and the Beanstalk and can be found at OCLC number 137-618-4078. This 630 was a little different from the other two because it has a note in the authority record for the uniform title stating that it can only be used as a subject added entry with the language of the item noted. As such, the 630 has zero as the first and second indicator, a subfield A with the uniform title Jack and the Beanstalk, and completes with a subfield L of English to denote the language of the item. Before we move on to our next field, I wanted to add a suggestion and reminder for when considering 630s. This mostly comes up when cataloging retellings or adaptations of fairy tales, folklore, etc. There are some of the older tales, like we saw with Jack and the Beanstalk, that do not have a title record that you can also use as a subject. However, there are many of the classic fairy tales and folk tales that do not have a uniform title record that can be used as a subject. Our example in the slide shows a title record for Cinderella. This has a couple of 667 notes or non-public notes in the authority record. The first 667 tells us that this heading is for the basic story and is not to be used as an authorized access point in bibliographic records without the language of expression added. This field is relaying that it can be used as a 730 field or as an added entry uniform title field in a record. The second 667 relays information about the uniform title being used as a subject. It states, this heading is not valid for use as a subject. Works about this tale are entered under the subject heading Cinderella Tale. The subject heading for Cinderella Tale would be recorded as a 650. When in doubt, do check the authority record for a uniform title you might want to use as a subject heading, as you may not be able to.
On to the 650 field, the 650 field, subject added entry and topical term. This is a repeatable field, so you can have, more than one 650 field in your record. The first indicator has the following options: blank, no information provided; 0, no level specified; 1, primary; 2, secondary. The main options for the second indicator include 0, Library of Congress subject headings; 1, LC subject headings for children's literature; 2, medical subject headings; 3, National Agricultural Library subject authority file; and 4, source not specified. Okay, so for most of the 650s, no. Okay, so the let's see, the pertinent subfield codes for this example are A, topical term. This subfield is not repeatable within a 650 field. X, general subdivision. This subfield is repeatable within a 650 field. Z, geographic subdivision, and this subfield is repeatable within a 650 field. And Y, chronological subdivision. This subfield is also repeatable within a 650 field. And V, form subdivision, and this subfield is repeatable within a 650 field. This is a poster that I cataloged for the Dixon Public Library, OCLC number 1574222-808. And as I discussed earlier, the National Tuberculosis Association ran this Christmas seal campaign and issued associated promotional posters. And I really didn't realize, I found the heading public health campaigns, and I thought that's a pretty cool heading, and also then fundraising. So, and then as you can see, I put them in the different 650 fields.
Our next field is the 651 field, or subject added entry geographic name. This field is also repeatable. This field is added for a geographic name used as a subject access point. The 651 has the option for a first indicator, which is blank, and the same second indicators as other fields presented thus far. The subfield codes that are available to include are subfield A, main heading, subfield E, related term, subfield V, form subdivision, subfield X, general subdivision, subfield Y, chronological subdivision, and subfield Z, geographic subdivision. This field has a few field instructions. Bit formats points out specific geographic names you would add in the field, which include administrative subdivision of an area, example, conservation districts, sanitation districts, etc. Astronomical bodies or objects, example, asteroids, comets, planets, etc. Historic or current human settlements, example, communes, extinct cities, etc. Infrastructure, examples, bridges, canals, streets, etc. Real estate, examples, estates, farms, ranches, etc. Natural features, such as caves, deserts, and valleys. Political jurisdictions, such as cities, countries, and provinces, etc. And recreational areas, such as amusement parks, camps, and squares, etc. There are two more instructions in this definition as well. Firstly, bit formats relays that when in doubt on how to use an entity, it should be coded. And how an entity should be coded, see alphabetical list of ambiguous headings. We do have that list added as a resource in our resources slide. The last relays use field 650 also for a jurisdiction name alone are followed by a subject subdivision. Use field 610 for a name of a jurisdiction that represents an ecclesiastic entity in direct order. Use field 610 for a city section name, a corporate name, an ecclesiastic entity, a form, subheading, and or a title of work entered subordinately. Use field 650 for a geographic name included in a phrase subject heading, example, Iran in the Quran. This last instruction may have made things a little muddy for you all. To give you a practical example, Lutheran Church in America is an example of a 610 field with an ecclesiastic entity jurisdiction in direct name order. Our jurisdiction in this is America, but this heading is for the corporate piece of the heading, the Lutheran Church. Sometimes breaking a heading down like this may help one understand why a heading is in the kind it is, but when in doubt, research. Our first 651 example comes from the collection I mentioned earlier, the Margaret Helks, The Nursing Careers of Margaret Maggie E. Helk and Margaret Peggy Helk, and can be found at OCLC number 13694999509. Between the two Margarets, they had careers in Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, and Florida. Hence, for this record, we have the 651 fields, Illinois, Iowa, Florida, and Indiana, ending with a subfield V of genealogy. The item pictured in our slide is from this collection. It is a registered nurse's license issued to Maggie in the state of Indiana in 1923. Our second example is for the oblong directory from December 1956 and can be found at OCLC number 156979000. 0754. In this record, we have two 650 fields, and both have geographic qualifiers. Our first field is for Oblong, Illinois, with Illinois represented as a qualifier in parentheses as ILL period, and it ends with a form subdivision of directories. Our second field is for Crawford County, Illinois, with Illinois represented as a qualifier in parentheses as ILL period, and it also ends with a form subdivision of directories. Our last example is for the Illustrated Atlas of White County, Illinois, and this can be found at OCLC number 130-372-3432. This record includes 4 different 651 fields. The first is for White County, Illinois, with Illinois represented as a geographic qualifier of ILL period, and it ends in the form subdivision of maps. The second is very similar to the first, but also includes a general subdivision in the subfield X of history. The third is for Illinois with a form subdivision of maps. The last is for a specific jurisdiction, the city of Grayville, Illinois, with Illinois represented as a geographic qualifier of ILL period and ends in a form subdivision of maps.
Our next field is the 655 field, or index term, genre form field. This field is repeatable. According to bib formats, this field records a term indicating the form, genre, and/or physical characteristics of the materials being described. Genre terms for textural materials designate specific kinds of materials distinguished by the style or technique of their intellectual content. For example, biographies, catechisms, essays, hymns, or reviews. Form and physical characteristic terms designate functionally and historically specific kinds of materials. Distinguished terms by an examination of the physical character, by the order of information within the item, or by the subject of the intellectual content. For example, daybooks, diaries, directories, journals, memoranda, questionnaires, syllabi, or timesheets. The first indicator options include blank or 0 for faceted, with each genre form term recorded in a separate subfield A or subfield B. A subfield C precedes each term in subfields A and B. Subfield C denotes the facet or hierarchy of each term in a particular thesaurus. The second indicator options are the same as the other fields in the presentation. The subfield codes that can be utilized for this field are subfield A, genre form data or focus term, subfield B, non-focus term, subfield C, facet or hierarchy designation, subfield V, form subdivision, subfield X, general subdivision, subfield Y, chronological subdivision, and subfield Z, geographic subdivision.
So for our first example, we're going to look at an item that Mary mentioned earlier, the Veterans Project, Murfreesboro, Illinois, World War II era interviews, which can be found at OCLC number 145-153-5485. The record for this DVD includes 2 655 fields with a first indicator that is blank, since this is not a faceted field, and a second indicator of 7, denoting that the source of the genre term form is Library of Congress genre form terms. The genre form terms used for this resource are personal narratives and documentary films. Our second example is from a 2020 Platt book, Washington County, Illinois, which can be found at OCLC number 155 967-2091. The record for this book includes 3655 fields, each with a first indicator that is blank and a second indicator of 7 to indicate those Library of Congress genre form terms as the source. For this record, we have the genre form terms cadastral maps, atlases, and remote sensing maps, followed by the delimiter 2 and LCGFT for Library of Congress genre form terms. And our third example is from Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, providing us with a different kind of record at OCLC number 311-684-437. For this book, we have 7 655 fields, each with a first indicator that is blank and a second indicator of 7.
All right. Well, thank you again for attending this presentation. This slide and the next 2 slides list all the resources that we use to create our presentation.
And on the call today are our co-presenters and CMC interns, Meredith Davis and Chris Deitner, our supervisor, Dr. Pam Thomas, my other co-presenter, Barb Scoby, myself, Kat Anderberg, Ryan Rafferty, Katie Roberts, and Andrea Joysta. Any questions?
Hi, Mary, Barb, Chris, and Meredith. Thank you so much for a great presentation. We do not have any questions presently. Nancy asked, do we need to add a 043 field whenever a 651 field is present in a bibliographic record? Yes. Always. And if you want to unmute yourself, you have the ability to do so, rather than putting a question in the chat. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the slides with the notes are in L2, so please feel free to download those, and we will send out the link recording by early next week, if not by tomorrow. Ryan, did you have a question?
I do, and I apologize, mostly because my position doesn't really work with subject headings as much. It's not a part of my project very much, and I kind of been stuck on something from like the very first slide, when you're talking about inverted and uninverted qualifiers. Like the very first slide, I think had like authors, comma, American. And then the next example gave like American poetry or English poetry or something like that. And so I went to the LOC Authority search page while you're doing your presentation, and I just typed in what I would search for, which would be American authors, and the results were unsatisfactory. And so I guess my question is, if I get, like, I think if I'm trying to come up with subject headings for a thing, and at first I do not succeed, should I automatically shift my brain thinking to like inverted and search for it that way? Is that kind of like a common workflow for people that deal with subject headings all the time, or am I not thinking about it in quite the right way? Or I guess, is there like a rhyme or reason or methodology to how some things are inverted and some are not?
That's actually a really great question. I always kind of end up doing that switch in my head where if, say, I'm searching for children's poetry and I'm not seeing that as a 650, which I'd probably look for that as a 655 as well, but I'll switch it if it's not. So poetry, comma, children's. And I think a lot of times that has to do with different groups, and that's why they're inverted. For instance, when I've made some subject headings now for, say, like a topical subject heading, you put the inverted order in a 450, which is the C reference. to kind of let you know, like, hey, this is not the way this is going to be used in a bibliographic record. But what we mentioned earlier, and I put this in the chat as well, is the H320. It talks to us a lot about how a lot of times you will see nationality put that way, you will see ethnic groups put that way, languages put that way. And it's not always consistent, which is part of the reason why we have funnels that do work with the Library of Congress to try to update things. Because the more natural language is kind of why you have some like in this that are like English poetry versus poetry common English. So yeah, I wish I had a better way of saying, well, it's always going to be this way, or it's always going to, unfortunately, it's not.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We've got another question from Quinn. How do you know when a title story is likely to have an X30 entry? Do you check everything by title in the NAF?
I feel like I'm answering all the questions, but Quinn, I love this question. Thank you. And the answer is yes, I do check everything in the NAF. Just because there's so many folk stories and mythologies and fairy tales out there, I could never cram it all in my head to know which would be a 650 and which would be or a 150 and which would be a 130. So yeah, I would always double check the authority file for that.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Oops, hang on, it looks like we've got a long one. Let me scroll back up. Nancy says, I'm curious if any of you have thoughts about this. Do you think we need to take any action regarding the message about the ALA Core Subject Analysis Committee's working group on subfield V retention and the recommendation to omit form subdivision subfield V in favor of using only LCGFT? I know the serials catalogers are not in favor of getting rid of the subfield V periodicals and only using that as a 655.
And I know as someone who coordinates a SACO funnel, we voted in favor of retention of the subfield V. I think one of our biggest concerns right now is what LC said about age demographics when it comes to the LCGFT going forward. They are not planning on supporting, say, if anyone wanted to make juvenile fiction an LCGFT or teen fiction as an LCGFT. Their thought process is that they do not want that used in a 655, but rather in a 385, which for a lot of folks that have thought about it, they don't feel the 385 is an accessible field for users. So that I think that's where a lot of people are right now.
She says, thank you. Just to put in a plug for our next month's webinar, Kat Anderberg will be presenting Metadata Basics Dublin Core. That will be April 9th at 10. Do we have any other questions? And I'm going to put the link to our evaluation form. Again, we want feedback on today's topic or subject, but we also want you, please, to give us some suggestions for future topics. We'll be meeting next month to work on the FY 2027 online with the CMC, and we would love to cover topics that you're interested in hearing about. So please fill that form out. All right, any questions relating to today's topic or just general cataloging questions? Or did anyone else have anything to say about the subfield V? Because I know it's a hot topic right now. And if I missed one of your questions, please repost it. I think I got them all. Okay, well, if there are any questions, again, thank you for attending, and a big shout out to our interns who bravely volunteered to help with the presentation, as well as Barb and Mary, of course. And I'm going to stop the recording now.